Hello and welcome to HuddleCamHD Live. Today we are doing an auto tracking camera demo. You can actually see the camera I'm using right now is the SimplTrack2 auto tracking camera. We've got two different cameras, two different SimplTrack2 cameras set up today to show you some interesting options for automating pan tilt zoom camera control for a variety of applications, which include lecture capture in education, but also house of worship live streaming to follow pastors as they present and their weekly worship services, and other applications such as broadcast and live streaming, as we're showing now, adding some fun interactive camera controls that are totally automated can really spice up any video project. So you can see here a picture in picture of the SimplTrack in action. So this camera will follow me pretty much anywhere that I move to. And then we have a second SimplTrack2, as you can see over here. And this camera is also tracking me in a little bit of a different way. And so that's what I want to start this broadcast and live stream off talking about. Two different ways to use auto tracking cameras. These SimplTrack2 cameras use auto tracking technology in two ways. So they use facial tracking and motion tracking to automatically follow a subject. Now, you're seeing a significant difference, in my opinion, between these two cameras. And the reason why is it's the way in which they've been mounted. So this camera is basically eye level, a little above eye level, but it's basically eye level. So it looks as though you and I, as a viewer of a video or a live stream broadcast, you're looking right at me, right? And so the focus is really on the direct connection between you and your viewers. This is ideal for worship services and presentations where the pastor really wants to have a close connection with their audience. It's also ideal for teachers that are really doing presentations where it's hands-on, right? Is there something directly in front of them that you want to focus on? Now, the other camera, which is pole mounted, has a lot more headroom. And we're going to show you the different options for setting up these auto tracking cameras. But the reason why a lot of schools and a lot of classrooms like to have that extra space is to make sure that even though the camera is automatically following the presenter, that the whiteboard and Blackboard presentation space is always in view. And that is an important aspect for a lot of our customers. And so we're going to show off both of these scenarios. We're going to take a look at the software as well. And we're going to answer all of your questions. So we have a live Zoom session going on right now. So we'll be opening that up for Q&A. People can unmute themselves, ask questions as necessary. We're also answering questions directly through YouTube and Facebook. So Mike, the vMix social is on the wrong lower third. It needs to be on the social lower third. But we're going to be showing up comments that are going to be coming in from social media. So let me try one here. This was a comment coming in from the outdoor station. Is this camera available in the UK? Yes, it is. Great question. These cameras are available and they are in stock. And yes, you can get them in Europe. So a couple people out there have been waiting for them to be available in the UK. Yes, they are available. Now, if you're having an issue joining the Zoom meeting, Tess, please help everybody out, get that contact information. Tess is on the Zoom call, and I see a lot of people are successfully getting into the Zoom session. Let me show you guys. I want to start with two things. One is I want to start with a picture that shows the space in which I'm in a panoramic view. So you guys can see what we have set up. And it's not the best picture here. It's a little blurry. We'll have to work on this for next show. But there's essentially three main locations that I present from in this studio. There's the space I am now. There is a Zoom presentation space next to me, and then there's a stand-up desk. So let me take you guys to those three places just to show you the functionality of the auto tracking cameras and how we're using them. So that's the main stage. And then over here, this is really my Zoom presentation space. And as you can see, the camera has the ability to pan, tilt, and zoom. Yet in the software, we've told it, hey, keep the top of that monitor in view, because that's an important part of this camera's ability, is to share with the audience the Zoom video conference. And for a lot of schools and education spaces, it's more important to capture all the notes on the whiteboard and the Blackboard behind them than it is to maintain that secondary shot. If we switch to the shot that's a little bit more eye level, you'll see here that this secondary shot, it's a little bit more personable, and it's just a different way of setting up these Ptz cameras. But I'm really a fan of both, and we're going to look at the software in just a moment to show you guys all the settings that we have set up. But let me take you to the other side of our studio, which over here on this side, this is where we have a kind of more of a stand-up desk presentation space. And this is, again, another opportunity to show you the auto tracking camera. But also in this moment here, I want to switch to the software. Here's our producer back here. And I want to show you the software in which allows us to tell these automatically panning and tilting cameras what you want it to do, because that's the most important part. So we got a chance to show you these cameras working. We've done a lot of work to make sure that the focus is perfect, that the tracking is perfect. And now I'd like to show you the software that allows you to customize these auto tracking cameras to specifically fit your room and your space. Now, I'm also going to be answering all the questions. Tess is on the Zoom call. Let's say hi to Tess really quickly so we can introduce Tess to everybody. Hi, Tess.
Hi, how you doing?
Thanks for joining today. So you're in the Zoom room right now. If any questions are coming in or any questions are on YouTube, just go ahead and ask me, because I'm going to move over to the production desk and show the software in a minute.
Okay, yeah, there's plenty of questions coming in. Just a request for you to show it tracking tilt as well.
Okay.
And
yeah, we can do
can
that.
you set the tracking range and what the zoom range is?
Yes, you can. So that'll be perfect segue to the next section, which will be the software. But just to show the tilt here, as I go down here, you see how it's following me down? And then emerging from my turtle's face. So I'm not going to jump, but you can see here, yes, it will do the tilt. Now, so tilt is up and down, right? And then pan is left and right. And so there's the tilt there. And then obviously the pan is the left and right. Now, we've done a lot of work with these cameras to make them fit specifically in our space. And I really enjoy having a camera, and our producer I know does as well, that's always got some movement going on. So we have other cameras in our studio. Before I go to the software, Mike, do you want to show the picture of the technology in our studio? So I can just so everyone's kind of on the same page of what is in this space. Because we like to, as we're showing you things, we also want you to kind of understand how the technology is set up. So I have a wireless microphone and a wireless in-ear monitor. Now, for a lot of worship services and for a lot of schools, they don't need to necessarily hear everyone on the far end. But for us right now, and I think for a lot of people, it's nice to be able to hear others in Zoom. And so that's why I have an in-ear monitor system, so I can hear everyone. You could unmute your microphone on Zoom and I can hear you, and you can hear me through Zoom. And so that is why we have those two wireless in-ear monitors and microphones. Now we've got 6 Ptz Optics 20x Sdi cameras. They're really some of the most popular Ptz cameras on the market, and they allow us to control the cameras and zoom into a lot of different spaces. And they're pan tilt zoom cameras, but they're not auto tracking cameras. So it's nice to have like a mix of auto tracking cameras, which can really add that movement and make it feel like there's a real camera operator. And especially in locations for a school or a church where there is no camera operator, it's really nice to have the auto tracking camera. And then we also have some static cameras. We have the Ptz Optics Z-Cam cameras for a couple specialized shots that we could show off if you guys are interested. And the HuddleCamHD Pro, which we'll show in a moment, which is our new 4K webcam. Now, our streaming computer is taking all of these video sources and making them available via the software we're using, which is called vMix. We have a new joystick we're not going to tell you about, but we have Mike there. He's the producer, and that's just showing off that beautiful custom-made computer there. There's, of course, a lot of different ways to plug cameras into a video and streaming recording system. And then my laptop, we're just showing there, is connecting to that computer via NDI. And of course, we're using Zoom as well to bring everybody into this space. So that's the technology setup. Let me go ahead and show you guys the software for the HuddleCamHD SimplTrack2. And then I'm going to introduce you guys to Stephen Haywood, our broadcast engineer, who's been using a lot of the SimplTrack2 cameras at his church and a few other places that are interesting. Let me answer a question from Shannon while we are here. Will it follow with a mask on? Well, I happen to have a mask here, and we get that question quite often. So I think it's worth demonstrating that because we all have to wear masks, right? And it will track with a mask on.
If you're not facing the camera as well to that question.
Okay, so will it track if I'm not facing the camera? So one thing I want to mention quickly is that the camera does support two different types of technology for tracking. One, and it uses both. It uses facial tracking and it uses motion tracking. So if there is no face, and I'll turn around here, it reverts to motion tracking. So if there's no face, it just goes for motion. But if there is a face, that helps it prioritize, what it's tracking. And we've had questions about, different skin color, complexions, and things of that nature. Facial tracking, okay, is essentially looking for two eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Doesn't matter the color of your skin. Doesn't matter the size of your head. It's two eyes, a nose, and a mouth. But if those two eyes and a nose and a mouth are not available to the camera, then it will fall back to motion tracking. So let's go. And again, happy to answer all the questions. How far can you be from the presenter? In the neighborhood of up to 75 feet, you can be from the presenter. But there's a sweet spot, between like 40 and 60, where you can get a lot of use out of this reference camera. So you can see here that the camera has an optical zoom lens, which is a really powerful 20x optical zoom lens that's designed to be capturing content from up to, between 25 and 75 feet away because it's got the optical zoom. But this is a high resolution reference camera. And that's what we're about to show you, the view from the reference camera. And the reference camera is how it is able to track a wide angle space and direct the Ptz camera as to where it should go. So let's get the software fired up and we'll show you guys the software that we've set up for this specific room, the auto tracking cameras that you've been able to see here. And we'll cut to that in just a second. I'm going to pull it up here. And the auto tracking software, let's see, here it is right here, allows you to control multiple cameras. So if you've got a bunch of cameras on your network, they'll all show up here. And when we hit just to take a look at it, you can see that because this little light is on, it's tracking. But if I hit stop tracking, tracking is off, and we can go into the settings area of this camera and really dig into the management of it. I need to double click the one that I want first, then hit settings, and it pops up right here. So this is the control software, and I'll zoom into it just a little bit more to give you guys a good view of it. And it has all of the parameters that we can set for auto tracking. And that's really what makes this software powerful, is all of those settings that are available for controlling it. And just to show it from the beginning here, we've got the device management, the main view, and when we double click it there, we can see that it's tracking. We'll hit settings there to start editing it. And now the first thing that we see is this green box around our presentation space. And what this is saying is this is the tracking zone. Now, for some classrooms, for example, you might have a really wide tracking zone. but you may also have like a doorway. And so you can put a blocking zone inside of the tracking zone to say, hey, if there's kids walking in and out of there, don't, count that as motion when you don't see a face. Now, it's always obviously using the face as its number one, but it's got that second area there. So that's the main thing here is these blocking zones. And then there's some new stuff called preset zones. I'm going to let Steven, our broadcast engineer, talk about those. But going a little further into details about what this product can do, we have tilt motion on. So some of you guys were asking about that. Can it do tilt? Not only can it do tilt, we can do tilt motion up and down. Auto zoom is on, as you can see here. So we have the ability for it to zoom in and out as it finds necessary. Permanent track is an outside platform are interesting. So if you're looking at this set, which is very wide, and then you look at this reference camera, the reference camera can see set 1 and 2, but set 3 is actually outside of the reference camera. So it's over here, if that makes sense, right? So this area on the left is not actually captured by the reference camera, even though we have it set.
Lost some audio on Paul. Mute or in Zoom.
So it looks like Paul is adjusting some audio, but as he's getting that situated, this is something that I use inside of the church. I'm using it in my studio here, and there's a lot of features here that we're going to show that are going to be coming to this camera very soon. So if you guys would like to see a sneak peek, we can kind of demonstrate that. So right here I have my SimplTrack. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put up a lower third using a macro that I have created here inside of the software that Paul was showing, and he'll get back to that. So one of the things that the SimplTrack will do is it'll allow you to put tracking places for presets. So if I walk into a certain area, it'll trigger a macro. If you guys are familiar with the Stream Deck, there's ways that you can create a macro by simply pressing a button, maybe bring up a lower third. Well, one of the things that I've created was, because I'm a single producer doing a live stream show, I like to be able to be hands-free. So if I want to get intimate, as Paul stated, with my audience, and I want to get up close and personal, I have an area set up so when I walk over to it, it's going to track me over here to my rack, and you're going to watch my lower third is going to fade out. And what's going to happen is, I know there's probably about 5 seconds, and my outro, but this isn't my outro, but we're going to cut to one of our kids at the church is actually controlling the cameras here. So this is all set up within a macro inside of the software, and it'll then go to a fade to black, and essentially it will be back to me because I can come off a fade to black. But I have it set up to auto mute as well inside of the software. So that's something that's going to be coming in a later version of the firmware. But it's really cool at the fact that you can do these things to help enhance your production inside the church, or if you're doing it in your own studio, if you're a self-producer. These are great features to have, and that's going to be coming soon in a future release of the software. Now, I know some of you probably have asked, what does it look like inside of a church? Now, our senior pastor, he likes to walk around a lot. And so let me pull down my lower third here, because that was just strictly for the demonstration purposes. But our senior pastor's wife, actually, we used this Sunday. And you can see the auto tracker here is picking her up, and it's following her as we have some stairs on the stage. and it's tracking her every movement. We did set up blockers, as Paul was showing. So it gives you a great idea of how this actually works inside the church, and still keeping a little bit of headroom because the senior pastor is a little bit taller. So it's great to have that ability inside of the church. Any questions coming through, Tess, on basically what I'm showing here within the SimplTrack?
There's lots of questions coming in. One of them is, if something were to come into frame, would it steal the tracking ability? And is there a way to prevent that from happening?
So if something does come into frame, depending on how big that source is or how close to the camera it is going to take over that tracking. Currently, we're working with the engineers to hopefully be able to detail how we can block certain things out. But unfortunately, that is the nature of the beast at this time, where if if my kids were to walk in, as Paul was showing right before he had to step away, you could set up blocking zones. So if the kids are smaller and they're walking in and out, it still stays on that facial recognition as opposed to the motion. So for the most part, if like when my buddy was over and I was demonstrating this to him, he was a little bit shorter than me. It still stayed tracking me. So I had to physically exit the area.
Okay, we got questions about, like, what if it was like a bird, which I have no idea actually what would happen in that case.
I'll be honest, that would be something that I have to get back to you on, because I have not used this yet in an outside scenario. But I can tell you this: you guys did see it tracking me. And Tess and Paul can attest to this. I have a lot of motion backgrounds that I use on my TVs behind me, and from arcades, constant lights moving. And you saw that it did track me. So I would have to say, if a bird flew by, it's still going to stay on you. That would be my hunch and my guess, without taking it outside.
And I'm sure the facial tracking wouldn't register on a bird. A lot of people are asking, can it be used on other cameras? This is its own camera with its own software. So not to be confused, no, it can't work with other Ptz cameras.
Correct.
Okay, there's lots of questions coming in here. I think that Paul's still having some issues, so
no,
if we can
I'm back. Thank you guys.
Hey, he's back.
My battery's died, so thank you for filling in on the spot there, Stephen. I really appreciate it.
Rookie mistake.
I know, and we have the new microphones that even have a battery level. So Mike, we got to remember to check that.
Wow.
Because that's why I got better microphones that show the battery level. So sorry, everybody. That won't happen again, hopefully. Stephen filled in. That's why we have the Zoom call, and everybody helping. So I think we were okay.
We're fine. There's one coming in for me now, Paul. Will the software work on Mac and PC?
So unfortunately, the software is only available via Windows right now. But the software that we showed, and again, I'm happy to dig into the software in more detail because there's some great stuff in there. And Stephen showed, Stephen, you went so quickly on what you were showing that I feel like we need to explain it a little more and even look at the software on how it's working, because I know you and I get it, but I think for a lot of folks, what Stephen just showed was the ability to have a space in your auto tracking camera scene that if motion goes in front of it, something can happen. So Mike, can we show the software one more time on the screen capture? And I just want to show the software side of that, Stephen. And then maybe we can, after we show it, you can do one more demo on that, because it is really cool what this can do. So let's show that full screen, Mike, and go ahead and hit the settings button. There we go. And so what I want to show here in basic 1, we click basic 1 there. Yep. Now you see the preset zone beta. It's at the bottom. There it is. A little lower. Yep, right there. There's 4 of them. Now this says it's in beta. As Stephen said, it's in beta, but go ahead and click one. And what you're able to do is draw a box like right here. Now, this is a good example of a space where, if trained properly, right? This is something that requires a little bit of training, but if used properly, you could say, hey, Mr. Teacher, or hey, live streamer, wave your hand in front of this and that will start recording. Or wave your hand in front of this and it will trigger the camera to go into a specific location. So we can have these special areas, as Stephen was mentioning. Stephen, now that we've shown this part of it, I feel like it'll probably make a tiny bit more sense when people start to think about this. So you could have, let's say I'm a teacher. If I wave my hand in the right side of the lecture, it triggers the software to start recording. If I wave my hand in the left side, it triggers it to stop recording. Those are the types of things in the COVID world we're living in, where we can have these touchless triggers for turning things off and on. And so let's turn them off now, Mike, because I don't want to trigger all this stuff that we're not necessarily, I'm going to be walking in front of some of those spaces. So let's turn those off. But now go to Senior 2.
Just
it's
click
at the
anywhere,
top tab.
Mike.
Just see the Senior 2. Yeah. So this is where, or is it Senior 1? Okay. Now we're allowed to show this. Again, this is beta. It is not out yet. But what this allows you to do is to say, hey, if the teacher waves his hand or the pastor waves his hand in front of preset zone 1, those preset zones that Mike was setting out, send a TCP command, which is or an HTTP command to vMix to start recording, or to OBS to start streaming, or to the TriCaster like Steven's using to do this, or to your Epiphan Pearl or your media site recorder. There's lots of different devices that you could send a message to say, hey, start recording. So that's what now, Stephen, I think if we go back and you go ahead and show that again, it'll make more sense to what you were doing.
Yeah, and I can actually take it once. I could take it one step further as well. I do have my setup so they can actually kind of see it here on this video. You'll see here, as Paul was indicating, I'm going to draw a box right around the rack there that you guys can see on the left-hand side, basically setting up that very preset that he said. It's very important to note with this, though. You don't want to kind of move your hand in and out of it. You don't want to wave at it, because essentially what it's going to do is it's going to trigger multiple times as your hand goes into frame. You want to kind of go there and stand there. And I believe I actually even have a 3-second delay on it, to where I go in there and it takes a little bit for it to activate. So, and I do that on purpose. Now, Mike, somebody in the chat room did say that when I put up my lower third, it is in reverse. It's might be on that end. You might want to flip it. So
I did.
Guys that are watching, we apologize.
Sorry about that.
Okay. So I just wanted to bring that up. All right. So what we'll do is, and I got to prep this by bringing up my lower third. I'm actually going to cut to my my camera that is the tracker over here. And then I bring up in preview, I bring up on the TriCaster, I bring up my DDR, which is basically my video bank that has all my videos. And what this macro is going to do, to explain to everybody, is that it is going to drop my lower third, and then about between 3 and 5 seconds later, it's going to mute my audio as it's transitioning in the video that I have queued up. And then after that video, it's going to fade to black. So as soon as that video comes on, I come back, I sit down in the chair, and I pull up in preview the other camera shot. So that way it's as if seamless, that I just go from one area to the other. You could trigger it to go to other cameras. You could trigger it to go to as Paul indicated earlier, a camera with a whiteboard. So let's take a walk here. So as you can see, this is the area that I have. Like Paul, I kind of cut things off because I have some lights over there. I don't want it to grab. But right in front of my rack here, I'm going to walk in front of it, and I'm going to stand here. And after a few seconds, the lower third drops. Now you can see my hands are here. I just want to show I'm not pressing any buttons. You'll see that the video is going to come in over top of me, just like that. And I'm on my way back. I'm sitting in my chair. I'm going to pull up my other camera. You're going to see this after this video. It's going to fade to black, and everything is good. So now I'm going to push my camera back live, and just like that, Paul, we are back in business.
It's cool stuff. And so these are the kinds of things that our customers have been asking for. So this is why we're showing you guys different applications, different ways to use auto tracking cameras. And many of our customers say, hey, you know what would be awesome? You know, if our teachers didn't have to touch a bunch of gear and then have another teacher come in and touch a bunch of stuff. Can you help us use the auto tracking camera to turn the projector on, or to, you know, avoid, you know, a lot of surfaces that need to be touched and cleaned? And that's just one scenario. For a pastor, you know, I was really happy to see that footage, Stephen. Looked really good from your church's Sunday service. You know, there's times when there's not many volunteers, right? And who's going to operate the camera? Who's going to operate the system? And somebody forgets to, you know, stop streaming. Now we can have the ability for the pastor, doesn't even have to go to the media booth, doesn't even have to do anything. He just pushes his hand. Now, as you said, it really should be kind of stay there for it like a few seconds, not just a swipe. It needs to really see that motion in that box. But still, great
if
stuff.
you want to think about this, guys, as just like a macro controller, or as Paul indicated, like a hot button on vMix or any other software, Wirecast, OBS, as many times as you move in front of that hot spot or that trigger zone is how many times it's going to send a signal to your software of choice or hardware. So you can imagine moving your hand like that in front of that is going to be like you pressing a button going like this, trying to activate it. So it's going to send those signals and it's going to activate it. So you can see as Paul was moving very clean. That's what you want to do. Go to your zone and stop and stay there and let the macro and the trigger take effect.
Now, one of the things that I wanted to mention is the way that we have this specific camera set up to show you guys how we've gotten it to the point that we have. Now, there's a few different variables for tweaking an auto tracking camera, and one of them is the tracking sensitivity. So you can see here, we actually have it on a scale from 1 to 7. We have the sensitivity on 7. So it's very sensitive to even the smallest movements that I'm making. Now, we did a test live stream last week, and we asked a lot of you guys, you know, does this make you feel seasick? Are you okay with this amount of motion? And if you watch television and you watch live broadcasts, and they have camera operators, you'll notice they respond to the talent's left and right views. So it's worth, you know, having a high sensitivity in this scenario. Now, I'm not sure if, you know, your scenario, you might want to do a little bit less sensitivity. The other things that we were reviewing is the pan tilt speeds. So the speed in which the camera will pan and tilt, we also have set fairly high. You can see that it's moving pretty quickly. But if you have the sensitivity too fast, you know, it might be harder to read the whiteboard and the Blackboard behind someone in their presentation. So that's just something to think about regarding tracking and the capabilities of setting these cameras up. So what is the zoom on the camera? Coming in from Sam Jerome, and the zoom is 20x. But it's not a 20x like a normal 20x. It actually starts at a 54-degree field of view, which allows it to zoom in almost as much as a 30x in many scenarios. So it's you can zoom in almost up to 75 feet away and get a shot like this, which is almost head and shoulders. Also, I should mention, by the way, there is the ability to set up the standard shot. So with this camera, you can see that standard shot pretty much has my head at the top, right? And we were showing earlier, the other camera has a higher standard of the top, and that is like where you can tell the camera, hey, keep this whiteboard or Blackboard or space behind me in view at all times. So those are some of the most important key details when you're setting up this. The idea is that you set it up once and it's set and forget, right? So the camera's set up and you've got it exactly the way you want it and need it. And there's not much need for altering the way it's set up. It's supposed to just run automatically from that point when it's fully set up. So
we've gotten a few questions. Has the camera ever, sorry to cut you off, has the camera ever been used in sports?
This camera is not ideal for sports. I will just throw that out there now. This is not designed for live sports. There's too much motion going on. It's really ideal for like a teacher at the front of a classroom, for a presenter in a live stream, for a pastor at the front of a stage. It is not ideal for live sports. So that's maybe something we'll work up towards, but it's certainly not the intent of this camera. I like where you guys are headed with it, though. Get creative. You know, we're trying to find more and more opportunities for using this camera. One that it would work for is like, here's a good example. Let's say you want to record a musician, and the musician's a guitarist, and you just get a camera on them, give it a little bit of motion to make the video a little bit more, realistic. And you have a solo guitarist, that works. But if you've got a 5-piece band, it doesn't know which one of the members to zoom into. So works for one presenter, not for 5 presenters on the same stage. So that hopefully answers that question. Can you show lower sensitivity? That's a great idea. So Mike, let's go back over to the software here. Coming in from Redurban, SE. Can we use it for live to YouTube and Facebook? Yes, you can. This camera can stream directly to YouTube and Facebook. And if you hit the subscribe button, we are going to have a video coming out soon on how to integrate audio. So go ahead and hit the start button first of all. So it starts tracking. See how the start button's off at the bottom? The start button, boom, start button's on now. Now hit the settings. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn, now let's go back to the basic one. And yeah, turn that preset zone off and hit save. I think that one stayed. There we go. Now go to basic 2. And this is where we have the tracking sensitivity at 7. And they asked us to kind of reduce that. Now, so let's reduce that down to 3 and hit save. And maybe we'll leave the pan and tilt speed. That's fine. Okay. That's fine. Hit save and exit. And let's do the same thing to the main front camera too. So double click that one and then hit settings. And what we're going to do is also go over to this one. That all looks good. And then we're going to reduce the sensitivity down to about 3. I would also, for this one, let's turn the pan speed down too. And yeah, tilt's fine too. All right, let's hit save. All right, so you guys have altered our settings. We had it perfect. I'll have to remember. All right, so let's give it a try. All right, so now we've reduced the sensitivity. Did you hit start tracking, Mike? Oh, look at that. Look at that. So it is tracking. It's just a heck of a lot less sensitive. So it's not responding the way it was at all. Look at that. You have to really kind of move it. So it gives you, if that's what you want, and that could be ideal for a lot of situations where you don't really want to have a ton of moving around left and right. I'll move over to the left a little bit. It's much slower pan speed, and it's a lot less sensitive. Now, because we're showing this off, we really want to show, the most sensitivity possible because it really shows. I like it. Maybe we could do a little bit less than our normal, but you can see here that it still pans and tilts, but it's going at a lot kind of slower speed and it's less sensitive. But one of the things that makes this camera really great is the reliability of the high sensitivity, so that it really feels like a real camera operator is using it. And so I can come over, to different spaces, even as we mentioned, outside of the reference camera. We're all the way over here and it still tracks perfectly. It's just a slower pan speed and a slower sensitivity now that we've done that. So again, it's dependent to the way that you want to use it. Let's go back and turn. I like it. I really do like it with the sensitivity higher and the pan and tilt speeds higher. In a classroom setting, would a student invited to the whiteboard steal focus? Yes, it is possible. It is possible. Now, we're going to adjust these speeds up to kind of where they were before. I'll let you choose, Mike. I kind of liked it up there. Yeah, that's fine. To answer Ryan's question, now, one thing that is true about the cameras is that they have both facial tracking and motion tracking. And the facial tracking is going to take preference. So if the student has their head to the whiteboard, it shouldn't take preference over the teacher's shot as well. Now, with that being said as well, if there's a lot of students coming back and forth between the whiteboard and the Blackboard, it's worth setting up the screen that way. So there's a couple, there's some really great stuff. So now it's a lot more sensitive, you can see here. But Ryan, the great thing about the software is that there's a lot of different things that you can do to optimize for that. You can give the teacher the ability to just, do that hand motion, which will call a preset to make sure that, it just basically temporarily turns auto tracking off and calls the exact right preset for that scenario. You can set the preset image like this one, as I said, like the top of my head is kind of like the top, but on this one over here, our standard has a much more space here. So in most classroom scenarios, you've got a lot more space to work with. And so that space allows you to have that second person at a whiteboard or a Blackboard. So, and then there is finally, if truly the camera loses who it should be and doesn't know what to do, there's a preset lost functionality that will just go back to, the main stage that you have set up. So there's a lot to talk about with this camera. We're going to be doing a lot more focus on it because we do have the new firmware, the new functionality, and the new distribution, not only in the United States, but in Europe and abroad. So it is available. MBU Recording is asking the price for these cameras is roughly $3,000. So a little bit more than a standard PTZ camera, but it has all that great functionality. Layla is saying it's a bit too much for her. She likes the slower. And I agree with you. And especially if you're, for what we're doing, we have a lot of action. We're moving, we're zooming, but I think she might be right, Michael. We might want to go down a little bit because we've been different ways. I think that it might actually be nice to have the sensitivity up, but the tracking speed, the pan speed a little lower. Because the sensitivity really keeps you in focus, even if you're like moving your hand gestures, which I personally like. I think that's the way a real camera operator would operate. But the pan speed, maybe we could take it down a little. Then regarding Calvary, Rio Rancho, Mexico is also saying they like the slower speeds, easier on the eyes. Well, then let's slow the speeds. And also, if you're expecting students to be taking notes and reading from the picture, two things. One, zoom it out so that they can see the notes. And we have some case studies on our website about schools that have said, the transition between a wide shot camera and a camera that can zoom in on the notes as the teacher's taking them really helps the students actually clearly see the notes on the board. In a worship service, it's going to be a little bit different. Stephen, if you're still with us, I will wonder, what was it like with the worship service that you were doing this? Did you go with the slower speeds or the higher speeds?
Yeah, I've kind of found that the setting it at like 4 or 5 on the tracking seems to be like a good medium where it's fast enough to keep up, like you saw with the pastor. If they tend to sway or walk a little bit back and forth, I don't want it to just jerk over or jerk back. The idea is to keep it moving, but not look like the camera's slamming over. But I mean, for the most part, it was really good. It tracked her. It stayed with her. But like you, I had to experiment with blocking zones to prevent other people from stealing the focus of the camera as she would go down to the front rows. So that was something that, again, we're still getting used to. And depending on the speaker, you may have to adjust those yourself in a house of worship space or in a school or college. You're going to have to play with it depending on that speaker.
Another question coming in, Tim O'Neill is saying, when a faculty member turns the back of their head and writes on a blackboard, will the camera focus sharply on the back of their head or the board? Now, this is a really great question. Now, as you can see right now, I'm in focus. Honestly, this keyboard, this PTZ keyboard in front of me about 6 feet is in focus, and this sign is also in focus. So this is part of the design of the lens of this optical zoom camera, which has real glass inside of it, where it can keep a large focal range in focus. Now there's sharpness, there's focus, and there's autofocus controls that we've really been working to implement. And Steven's actually, working on some beta firmware with our product team to really make those controls easier to use. But let me just go down the line. So one is autofocus, right? So it's automatically doing its best job to focus on what's in the picture. There is the ability to restrict the focal range. So you could say, don't ever focus on anything in front of 2 meters or 6 feet. That's just too close. If anything comes up there, don't even throw the autofocus off. It's not necessary. Then there's also sharpness, which is just the overall sharpness of the image, which you have the ability to adjust. And then there is manual focus. But again, these cameras are really meant in most scenarios to be set and forget, where you want to set the camera up and you want it to just work always. So autofocus is ideal there. There is a focus calibration tool that we're working on. It's not quite released yet, but in general, the autofocus, as you can see, performs very well. And if I go to the back of this board, you can see, the background is in focus, right, Mike? And then my back of my head's probably in focus too, right? So it's got a wide enough focal range that it should be able to do both. Now, the next question here is in a video conferencing room, and we get this question a lot. There's a lot of people, there's a chairman, does it track audio? No, this is not an audio tracking solution. This tracks video. So it tracks the motion and the facial tracking. If there's a whole bunch of people in a room, there is something we call the HuddleCamHD Huddle View. And what that does is it auto frames the image so that if 3 people walk in, it zooms into 3 people. If 6 people walk in, it zooms into 6 people. And that is better fitted for that type of scenario. Ross is chiming in here and just saying, keep the high sensitivity, but drop the speed. And I think I'm in agreement there that I think the sensitivity is good. It's giving us the type of movement that we want. But the speed is just a hair. I think you did that, right, Mike? Nice. I'm really liking that. It's slower, a little easier. Because we have to remember, and I'm getting a little technical here, but we're encoding. The video looks beautiful to me, but you got to remember we're encoding it, which means we're compressing it, streaming it up to YouTube and Facebook and different places. And then that is being distributed over content delivery networks that span the globe. And you don't want to have, if you can avoid it, a whole bunch of movement. Now, it's nice to have some. It's much nicer than just a static image. But the more movement you have, the more pixelation actually will occur. So Tess, if there's any final questions, anyone who wants to ask a question in Zoom, now would be the time. And we're kind of just wrapping things up here. I think we did a good job showing off these 2 scenarios.
Yeah, I've been answering some questions in the Zoom chat. Quite a few people have been chatting in there. You just answered one about the huddle view because people were asking, and will it be able to, focus in on somebody who's speaking in a room? And yes, the huddle view, not the SimplTrack2, would be our recommendation for that. Okay, let's see. Where do you input the stream URL and keys into the system? I'm guessing they mean a direct stream from the camera.
The software, really. Let's pop open the software, Mike, and I will show you guys. Because this is actually a great question. The SimplTrack2 can stream to 4 content delivery networks at the same time. It can do 4 RTMP streams. So let's show the desktop capture. And we'll go ahead and cut to that. All right, great. Now go to device management. and click on either one and hit remote configuration, the cog above it. There you go. And then just go to the RTMP. It's the third one in the tab there. In the tab at the top, there's tabs. There you go. Okay, so this is where you enter the streams. So there's up to 4 streams that you can send out. So you just copy and paste that RTMP in there, you hit save, and it starts streaming. So you can just copy the whole stream key and server URL for Facebook or YouTube, and boom, it starts streaming there. Now keep in mind, you probably want to include some audio with your video. So you would want to plug in a microphone headset, and I actually have a great example that we're going to be showing in a video. So again, hit the subscribe button because this video is coming out soon. This is the Sarmonic Blink 500 that we're going to be showing, and this is such a cool little set here. This device is got 1 receiver and 2 transmitters. And you can see here, I think this is the receiver. It has a 3.5 millimeter audio output. So you can just plug that right into your SimplTrack2. And then you've got 2, and this is only $2.99 for all this. And you've got 2 little wireless lapels. I guess, is the microphone built in, right? Yeah, the microphone right there. So you can just clip that right to your presenter. And we're going to be doing some demonstrations with this and some technical videos on that. So keep your eye out for that on our upcoming video. All right, Tess, anything else?
I forget, is it PoE?
This camera does not feature PoE, but there are, if you absolutely would like PoE, there is the ability, I have to double check this, but there's a company called PoE Texas, and they actually make power over Ethernet delivery boxes that takes Ethernet and turns it into, splits it between Ethernet and the power. So it is definitely possible to power these over Ethernet, but an adapter is necessary. And if anyone is super interested in that, just email me at paul.richards@HuddleCamHD.com, and I'll find the exact part number for that one, because we can definitely find, it's not an expensive adapter to get that working.
Great, and just cover the outputs for me really quick.
That is a great question. And we don't have any great shots of this camera unless, Mike, you use the LCD stand-up 20x to show the back, but it's still not going to be amazing to show the back of this camera, even from the camera that's behind it. But essentially, this camera has SDI, and it's not even going to be a great shot, but it might be cool because this camera is on a pole, and so it is a really cool space because it's angled in our space to maximize its ability to show. So you can see it's on a pole there. So right now we have to it. This is actually a 3.5 cable for a tally light right there, which lets me know when the camera's on. But we have an SDI cable. You can actually see there's a USB port there. So just in total, there's a USB. So that's great for Zoom. Plug it right into your computer. There's an SDI, and that's our main video feed. And that's very common in house of worship and education to have a long cable run. This is a 50-foot cable run, but you could run a 100, 200-foot cable if you needed to very easily. And then there's a DVI connection. Sorry, this view isn't great. We'll have to get a dummy model to just put on the table. There's a DVI connection, which you can use to pull in HDMI. And then there is a 3.5 millimeter audio cable so that you can run audio directly into the camera, which is then available to go out in your live streams as well. So I think to whomever's asking to look up the PoE splitter, yes, look for PoE-Texas, I think that's it.com. But there's great PoE splitters. And you're just looking for the correct barrel adapter, which is what I would look into for you if that is of interest. Does this camera have NDI capabilities? That's a great question. And that is something that I will say, all I can say is to stay tuned, because that is on our radar, and it's something that we definitely want you guys to be thinking about, because we are considering that. That's all I'll say. Will it work with 25 and 50 frames per second? Yes, it will. So this camera does support all of the major frame rates available, and that is set up in the software.
Hey, Paul, do you
Yes.
want to see the back of the camera?
Yes.
Would you like to see the back of the camera? How's that?
There we go. Perfect. So left to right there, we've got audio. And that, thank you, Stephen, because that brings up a good point. There's an SD card slot in there for recording video directly onto the camera, which is a great backup for, any reason. It'll just overwrite that backup card, and then you can actually retrieve the video. You don't even have to take the SD card out. You can actually retrieve the video directly over the network using the software. But thank you for that, Stephen. And then you got the DVI, which can be converted to HDMI easily, SDI, traditional serial cabling, and then USB. Beautiful. All right, guys. Well, I think that's about all we have time for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to roll the outro, and stick around if you want to see the Ptz Optics show at 2 o'clock. Playlist?